expecting someone else?
Welcome one and all to Déjà-Review, where today I'm going to start my Pierce Brosnan Bondathon retrospective reviews. But firstly, to put things into some kind of context, I'll just say that I've always been a massive fan of the James Bond franchise. I've seen all of the official series entries numerous times and think that each and every film has its merits. I can already hear people questioning why I'm starting my Bond reviews with this one, when there are at least 16 films that came before to discuss. Short answer is, Pierce Brosnan's my favourite actor to play 007. I grew up with Pierce's 4 films, know them inside out, and unquestionably have more to say about his adventures than the earlier films. So that leads up nicely to our topic for today, GoldenEye. Released in 1995 after a 6-year hiatus for the Bond franchise, a lot had happened since 1989. The Cold War ended, resulting in the collapse of the Berlin Wall. MGM, United Artists and Danjaq went through a whole host of legal disputes and ownership problems with the franchise, and, last but not least, Pierce Brosnan was given a second chance to play the iconic 007 role and snapped it up with both hands. He'd previously had to bail out of the part 9 years earlier due to a contractual agreement with his successful American TV show at the time, Remington Steele. Of course, the part was passed on to Timothy Dalton, who did the best he could, given that he only starred in 2 moderately successful instalments. GoldenEye was in fact initially envisioned with Dalton in mind, but his contract expired after the legal wranglings that put the franchise on hold for an unprecedented number of years. Enough time had actually passed for many moviegoers to begin questioning whether the iconic British spy had any place in modern day cinema, but luckily, Brosnan was on hand to bring Bond back to the forefront for a whole new generation of fans. So yeah, let's dive into his 00 debut and see just how well it holds up after 26 years. Spoiler alert, it holds up pretty well. The film opens up, as every Bond film should, with the standard gun barrel sequence, and I'm just going to let this one play out in full for you because it's absolute perfection. The walk, the turn, the enhanced visuals, the smooth blood flow, it all just makes for the most stylish execution, and even the music adds to the overall effect, which isn't something I'll say often in this review. I'll get on to Eric Serra's strange score in due time, but let's just say it works wonders alongside the intro, and most of the pre-title sequence for that matter. So the movie opens up in spectacular fashion as we see Bond make a bungee jump off a giant dam and make his way down into a Russian weapons facility. The first couple of minutes or so of this movie are perhaps the most iconic, and for good reason. This is a stunt that doesn't sound all that impressive, but it's still a joy to behold even to this day. Here, we get our first few glimpses of Brosnan as he sneaks his way into the facility, thanks to some nifty gadgets. The use of lighting in these scenes adds a real element of mystery to the character and builds up 007's entrance quite nicely. We soon get our entrance in the form of Bond hanging upside down in a filthy cubicle and knocking an inconvenienced guard out cold with one punch. It's hardly the most elegant first appearance, but it gets the job done and comes equipped with an archetypal one-liner.
Beg your pardon, forgot to knock.
It's here that we soon meet Alec Trevelyan in the form of Sean Bean. He's soon established to be 006 and working in the same assignment as James Bond. Although we only get a brief few minutes of them making their way through the base, we get a developed sense of their working relationship through seamless teamwork and back and forth one-liners.
It's too easy. Half of everything is luck, James.
And the other half? Fate.
As mentioned, we don't witness them on the job for long, but the camaraderie we do see gives more punch to the plot further down the line. All is going well as they're about to set up time bombs to blow up the whole compound, when suddenly they're ambushed by Russian guards, headed by the menacing figure of General Urumov, played excellently by Godfrey John, and a role that often goes unappreciated. Almost immediately 006 is caught and executed point blank in front of Bond. You can sense the shock and anger in his face as his friend is brutally murdered, or so it seems. There's no cheeky smirks or unnecessary puns for the rest of the sequence, it's just Bond doing whatever the hell he can to get out of that place in one piece. He has the impromptu idea of changing the timers from 6 minutes to 3 and finds the quickest way out of the facility, creating a clattering diversion as he makes his way outside and chases down a light aircraft. In a strange move, Urumov orders his men to cease fire on Bond as he flees, and we end up with one of the most outrageous stunts that the movie has to offer. Honestly, I know the Brosnan era often gets slated for getting more and more absurd with each passing entry, but it's easy to forget that the climax of this pre-title sequence stretches the laws of physics to the absolute extreme. As ropey as some of the effects are, there's no denying that it's a thrilling way to open up the first Bond film in years, and a real crowd pleaser in every sense. I mean, if you can ignore some of the liberties the filmmakers took when it comes to continuity here, like how Bond jumps off a 700-foot dam only to end up at the top of a snowy mountain, or how every one of Uramov's men conveniently disappears by the time the facility blows up, then there's an abundance of greatness to be enjoyed in this opening. It's an action-packed romp that ties in nicely with the overall plot, while still being neatly self-contained. It also sets the tone well for what lies ahead. Yes, we can expect all the standard puns and outlandish action that we've come to expect from the series, but there's also a dark edge to this film that lingers in the background, only coming to the forefront when the storyline warrants. So anyway, we quite literally blast our way into the all-new improved title sequence designed by Daniel Kleinman, and it looks the biz. Gone are the dated 2D silhouettes of the previous era, and we are thrust into a completely computer-generated world of fallen Russian leaders and a visual representation of the Soviet collapse. It all looks properly great, and is complemented nicely by Tina Turner giving it her absolute all in the title song. I'm not sure if it's my favourite song from the era, I'll maybe get to that later, but it certainly leaves its mark and sounds like quintessential Bond, which is always a bonus. We're then immediately thrown straight back into the action, 9 years after the previous events in Russia, as we see Bond jetting around the French mountain roads in his legendary Aston Martin DB5. The purpose of his joyride is apparently because he's being evaluated by the woman sitting next to him, but all that goes out the window when femme fatale Xenia Onatopp pulls up next to him. We get a playful exchange between the two in the form of a street race, all while Bond's passenger is sitting there shitting herself. It's a fun way to open things up as we see Bond having a rare old time, almost toying with Xenia and seeing just how crazy she is behind the wheel. The only thing that lets the whole sequence down is the downright pathetic soundtrack playing in the background. This track, titled Ladies First, is more suitable to a Mario Kart race than a James Bond chase. After a few good set pieces, she soars off in a sparkling red Ferrari and Bond makes certain he'll be getting full marks in his assessment, partly in thanks to that heavenly handbrake finish. Later that evening at Monte Carlo Casino, Bond spots the very same Ferrari parked outside and ventures inside to make contact with the woman of the day. This scene just screams James Bond. It's like something plopped straight out of a Sean Connery film, and aside from the lack of cigarette smoke in the air, it even looks like it was shot in the 1960s. We get some more playful banter between Bond and Xenia as they size each other up.
Very good, Mr. Bond. You've been to Russia?
Not recently. I used to drop in occasionally. Shoot in and out.
It's very different now. A land of opportunity.
You can sense subtle tension bubbling beneath the surface, but for now it's all kept respectful. After Xenia leaves with her hunk of an admiral, Bond scopes her out to see exactly where she's going and who else this crazy Russian woman may be involved with. He runs some stealthy photographs through an interactive fax machine in his DB5 and finds out via Moneypenny that she's suspected to be linked to the Yanis crime syndicate and that M has authorised him to observe her further. And we're then treated to one of the seediest sex and death scenes of the entire series. If we weren't quite sure of how manic Xenia was up until this point, we certainly get the answers to that here, as she nearly rips her Admiral companion's chest open before crushing him to death with her thighs. I mean, poor fella, but what a way to go. Getting the wind crushed out of his lungs while his ID gets nabbed from his jacket by, presumably, Urmov. Next we see a Bond, he's skulking onto our Manticore yacht where the poor Admiral met his end the night before. He's barely on board and instantly gets pounced on by some random sailor who gets his arse absolutely handed to him. Bond makes light work of him with just a towel to aid him, which he keeps after dispatching him so he can wipe his brow. It's class. After some more snooping, the Admiral's body gets unveiled as he plummets out of a wardrobe. I've always found it comical that he just gets shoved in there, ready to collapse, and the first person who innocently opens the door. Another funny point is that he looks happier and happier with every cut of the edit. They would have definitely struggled to get the lid of his coffin down when they planted him. Anyhow, this confirms foul play to Bond, and he jumps in a speedboat and heads to the nearby unveiling of an all-new Tiger helicopter. No one shit's about to go down. and down it goes as Xenia and Urimov, who's disguised as a dead admiral, get onto the landing craft, kill the pilots and steal the Eurocopter as 007 arrives a day late and a dollar short. To the average onlooker, he must have looked like a right madman here, just trying to fuck up the whole event. We get a nice change of scenery now as things switch to the Severnaya Space Centre in Siberia. It's here we meet Boris Grishenko and Natalia Semyonova, two workers in the centre who've obviously known each other for years and share a prankish relationship. Alan Cummings' Boris is often singled out as a weak link in a film, jam-packed full of great characters. And yet, I do see him as a bit too cartoonish compared to everything else, but his involvement in the plot is certainly credible, plus his corny
I am invincible!
catchphrase leads to an almighty payoff at the end. On with the story as we get a few scenes showing that Boris is an expert hacker on the computer before he disappears into a blizzard for a quick ciggy and never returns. The scare pair arrive in the stolen Tiger and lay waste to the whole workstation. Well, Xenia does as Urimov watches with a bemused expression. I mean, the man is clearly evil, but I think her enjoyment in mowing down dozens of innocent workers even frightens him a tad. Fortunately, our Natalia is away skiving at the time of the attack and manages to hide it out of sight in the nick of time. The scare pair fake their way to accessing a space-based weapon called GoldenEye and set the Severnaya facility as the target of a satellite attack. A poor injured worker hits out a distress call before getting gunned down again, but the pair soon leave, contently knowing that the Russian fighter jets will never make it here before the blast goes off. At the time of this attack, James Bond has been called to MI6 due to a satellite image sighting the missing Tiger helicopter in northern Russia. They're tracking the events of the space station when all of a sudden a massive EMP blast cuts off their signal. Back to Severnaya as we see the pilots all get downed by the EMP as the Tiger helicopter vacates the vicinity unharmed due to it being designed to withstand such a disturbance. There's some great shots here of the jets exploding, and although the miniatures stick out like a sore thumb nowadays, they're always preferred over excessive CGI. As the third jet soars into the centre, the whole dish caves in and gives our sole survivor Natalia a way out of the rubble. Bond spots her departing the site via a heat signature satellite and knows it's worth pursuing this person, as they'll be the only one able to identify who caused this whole massacre and why. It's worth noting that the main players at MI6 have all been given a radical 90s update for this movie. Moneypenny, now portrayed by Samantha Bond, still has some flirtatious banter with Bond but doesn't take any of his shit and gives as good as she gets.
What would I ever do without you?
As far as I can remember, James, you've never had me.
Not lusting over him like some previous incarnations of the character. This change wouldn't last long, but makes for some great back and forth here. The biggest and most successful overhaul, however, is undoubtedly bringing Judi Dench in as 007's boss, M. This could have been disastrous had they cast the wrong actor for the part, but Dench brings such a sense of seasoned believability that you accept her status as head of MI6 completely. Her and Bond have an icy cold relationship, especially in this endlessly quoted conversation.
Because I think you're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, a relic of the Cold War, whose boyish charms, though wasted on me, obviously appeal to that young woman I sent out to evaluate you.
Point taken.
But behind all that, you can see their relationship is built upon a masked mutual respect. She does mellow slightly throughout Brosnan's tenure, but never goes soft on him, as she's well aware that he's the very best agent they have at their disposal. The film does start to slow its pace a great deal in this middle section, as we bounce around from location to location in St. Petersburg, meeting up with a motley crew of dubious characters. We start with Urimov meeting the Russian Defence Council, headed by Defence Minister Mishkin. Urimov tries to pass the blame of the Severnaya attack onto Russian separatists and resign, but the council are having none of it. Instead, they tell him of another survivor he's unaware of and make sure he looks into the matter before jumping to conclusions. Of course, at this point Boris is evidently in with Urimov and he was certain of him being the sole survivor, so this fucks up his plans majorly. We then get a delightful Q-branch scene with the late great Desmond Llewellyn giving Bond all sorts of handy toys before he gets sent off on his mission, including the almighty exploding pen. These segments with Q are always ones to be cherished, and Desmond has such a lively chemistry with Pierce that you can't help but just smile as they banter off each other, while all sorts of contraptions go off round about them. Desmond was really starting to show his age here though, and it's apparent that he's reading from cue cards throughout most of his takes. That's a trivial nitpick to have, I know, and it doesn't take away from any of the witty distractions going on here. Perhaps a more deserving nitpick is that we get briefed extensively about Bond's new BMW, laced with all sorts of gizmos, yet we never get to see any of them in action. They did make up for that big time in the following film, but still, it seems like an opportunity wasted somewhat. So we're now officially following Bond in his mission as he arrives in St. Petersburg airport to meet with his CIA contact, Jack Wade. It's clear that Wade is intended to be this generation's mentions Felix Leiter, and he immediately rubs Bond up the wrong way, resulting in him getting jammed in a car at gunpoint and forced to reveal his muffy. Joe Don Baker, of course, portrayed the villainous arms dealer Brad Whitaker not 2 films ago in The Living Daylights. Fair to say, he's much better suited to a comic relief ally who gets some good moments with Brosnan in his scenes. Wade informs Bond that Yanis is basically a ghost, and that the best thing he can do is take him to meet his ex-KGB rival, Zukovsky.
Valentin Dmitrovich Zukovsky?
The very same. Naturally, Bond's got a history with Zukovsky, having shot his knee out years prior and left him with a permanent limp, after a few technical hitches. Wade takes 007 to Valentin's shithole of a hideout, where we get one of the greatest moments of the whole film.
Walther PPK. 7.65mm. Only 3 men I know use such a gun. I believe I've killed 2 of them.
Lucky me.
Robbie Coltrane's just awesome as Zukovsky and comes off as a dangerous guy to get in the wrong side of, after Bond takes the piss out of his mistress.
I'm strangling the cat.
Strangling a cat. That is Irina, my mistress.
Pretty talented girl.
He manages to get Zukovsky to reveal what he knows about the estranged Yanis figure, as well as bribing him to set up a meeting with the man. I've never quite understood the ins and outs of what's going on in this conversation, thanks to prior scenes landing in the cutting room floor. When funeral parlours and explosives start cropping up out of thin air, I'm playing catch up. But I do understand that Bond and Valentine are even by the end, both gaining from this meeting. As this has been taking place, we see Natalia also arrive in St. Petersburg, narrowly avoiding the authorities who will no doubt be after her. She cleverly cons her way into a computer centre after tricking some fella with the worst comb over I've ever seen in my puff. Honestly, give it up. Her aim is to try her luck at contacting Boris, as she would have no doubt noticed that his dead body was nowhere to be seen at the Severnaya site. She does get chatting to him via the most 90s looking email system ever, and agrees to meet him at a nearby chapel. I've always found her arrival at the chapel to give off some seriously eerie vibes. She obviously senses danger, but it's almost like there's a supernatural element to this brief moment. It works so well. Natalia soon bumps into Boris, who is now in leagues with that crackpot Xenia, so she knows she's up shit creek without a paddle. These moments we share with the lead girl are rare in these films. Her character is fleshed out significantly compared to most of the girls who end up in bed with Bond. She gets her own integral storyline, and the screen time is almost shared equally between her and Bond for the first half of the runtime, even though they haven't met up yet. Speaking of James Bond, the next time we see him, he's relaxing away in a hotel pool before getting pounced on by our old pal Xenia. We get some excellent exchanges between the two.
You don't need the gun, Commander.
That depends on your definition of safe sex.
Before they end up in a pretty brutal fight. The harder Bond tries to stop her, the more aroused she seems to become, and hats off to Famke Janssen in this role, as she comes off as dangerously demented in these scenes, a real loose cannon. After a while, Bond has had enough and burns the arse off her before ordering her to quit the foreplay and take him to Yanis as initially planned. After she reluctantly takes him to the meeting place, he savagely knocks her unconscious, in a rare instance of sheer rage from the character. This Soviet graveyard we end up in is definitely one of the more memorable locales the film has to offer. Again, like I mentioned with the chapel before, it gives off some real unearthly atmosphere, and you're not sure if Yanis is going to appear or the ghost of Vladimir Lenin. The spooky fog does eventually give way to reveal the figure of Alec Trevelyan. Yes, 006 come back to haunt 007. It's a powerful sight seeing 006 standing there in front of his old friend with half his face badly scarred thanks to the explosives 9 years earlier. This reveal works just fine, but I wouldn't think in Alec's plans too much or you'll give yourself brain freeze. Why he had to fake his own death in front of Bond and then wait 9 years to actually set his plan in motion is anyone's guess. Alec explains the origins of his Two-Face Yanis alias and closes the conversation by having Bond shot with a tranquilizer dart before he even has time to aim his Walther at him. This is where the movie really starts to pick up the pace, as we hear the deafening screams of Natalia in the back of the Tiger helicopter.
I'm here! I'm here!
Honestly, I find her yells here to be like chalk on a blackboard. As Bond awakens in the pilot's seat, we see that both of them are tied up as a Eurocopter is just about to fire a couple of rockets on itself. This is genuinely one of my favourite moments of GoldenEye, and another infrequent example of Serra's score actually greatly enhancing the visuals. Things look bleak until Bond notices a comically large emergency eject button sitting right beside his head, and this was definitely a faux pas on 006's part. Surely would have suspected Bond to be clever enough to find that big ejector knob when he woke from his slumber. Anyway, it all makes for a tense escape as they're both rocketed into the air split seconds before the chopper is blown to smithereens. They get a brief few seconds of tension-riddled freedom before getting immediately arrested and held captive by what I'm guessing are the Russian army. A small point, but I'm not sure if they've been held in there all night because it switched back to daylight by the time they're chucked into the cell for questioning. Bond figures out that Natalia must be the sole survivor of the Severnaya attack and demands to get all the information out of her that she knows. All that Natalia reveals is that Uramov and Boris are in the scheme, before Mishkin busts into the room and interrogates the two of them. He's pretty certain Bond is behind the theft of the Tiger and GoldenEye, so he's threatening him with death. Natalia breaks up their bickering in style.
Oh, stop it, both of you! Stop it! You're like boys with toys.
And goes on to inform the minister that it was his very own Uramov who stole the weapon and that there is another satellite of similar power still out there. We then get a drunken Uramov clatter through the door and execute Mishkin and a nearby guard. I've always found it amusing that they made the general pissed as a fart in this scene. Things have probably gone so tits up from after the attack that he's just turned to the comfort of alcohol. Before Uramov gets a chance to kill her two leads, Natalia kicks a chair at him, giving Bond time to slam him into a wall and get a gun from the guards. Things really shift into top gear here as we get an incredible shootout throughout the building, ending with the two of them blasting away into the archives with Uramov hot in their tail. The one thing that's always pestered me here is that Natalia suddenly switches into a damsel in distress as she falls helplessly into the villain's arms. I get that it gives Bond the motivation to give chase, but she's been previously conveyed as a strong, independent character and comes off as somewhat of a klutz in this one particular moment. It's no biggie though, as Bond whips off his belt and launches himself out of the window and into the cockpit of a mammoth T-55 tank. What follows is undoubtedly one of the greatest and most destructive chases in all of Bond history. I wouldn't exactly say that GoldenEye is action-packed throughout, but when the action does commence, it's downright immense, with this tank chase through St. Petersburg acting as the centrepiece. Bond probably puts more lives in danger in this one set piece than everyone else in the movie combined, but it's just so damn cool to see a tank drift around corners and destroy half a city as Bond hunts down Uramov and Natalia. Again, another highlight is the general sipping away at his hip flask and spouting all sorts of nonsense.
Use the bumper! That's what it's for!
The chase also ends with one of the most Bond-esque moments of them all. So Uramov and Natalia finally arrive at a train yard and board what can only be described as a fucking unit of a train. Bond spots them and concocts a plan to stop them dead in their tracks. Aboard the carriage, Natalia is brought to Xenia and Alec, who seems disappointed Bond is still alive and no doubt hot in their heels, after some less than amorous lovey-dovey stuff. I soon see that Bond has somehow managed to sneak ahead of the convoy and drive his tank onto the tracks. Alec demands that they ram the tank, thinking Bond will be inside when they collide, but he instead opens fire and dives aside as a flaming train cruises towards the tank and goes up in a ball of flames. After the seriously cool explosion, the train gets derailed to fuck as Bond jumps on board and holds Alec and Xenia at gunpoint, insisting that they let the girl go. As Uramov enters the room holding Natalia hostage, Bond is left in a catch-22 situation. Kill the main baddies and lose the girl, or save the girl but jeopardise the mission at hand. It is a great moment of tension, and although we have no doubts about which choice Bond will make, it allows for the feeling of suspense to rise for a second as Bond utters,
Kill her. She means nothing to me.
I mean, of course, this is just a bluff, and he promptly about turns and kills Uramov, saving Natalia's life but leaving him trapped and double trapped in this heavily armoured train. As I said, great moment, but I just wish they'd handled General Uramov's death with a tad more care. Everyone else of importance gets a memorable death scene, and this poor guy just gets shot in a blink and you'll miss it moment. It's a shame, because he was the primary villain for much of the film and kinda goes out with a whimper. Anyway, the train gets locked and we hear Alec tell them that he set the timers for 6 minutes.
Same 6 minutes you gave me. It was the least I could do for a friend.
What does that mean?
We've got 3 minutes.
This is an apt callback to the pre-title sequence and amps up the anxiety levels as they've really got to think on their feet if they don't want this train to be their metal coffin. As Bond faffs around with his laser watch, cutting a convenient hole in the floor, Natalia jumps onto her computer with the aim of hacking Boris's hard drives and finding out the exact location of their hideout. To do so, however, she has to crack one of the most piss-easy riddles you'll ever come across.
What else do you call your bottle?
What?
It's Boris' password. He plays word games. It's what I sit on, but I don't take it with me.
Chair.
Like I said.
Seriously, the rest of the script is pretty damn airtight, but I feel they could have devised a much better word game than this shite. What's worse is that Bond gets it without a second's thought and makes her look like a right idiot. So anyway, she manages to get a rough estimation of Boris's location before the transmission is cut off, and the two narrowly escape the train as it detonates. You know what, Natalia really does have a point here.
Do you destroy every vehicle you get into?
Just about every set or vehicle in this film ends up being destroyed via a massive explosion. From the outbreak at the holding centre to the train escape, the film is never let up for a second, so it's only expected that things have to slow up somewhat before the final showdown, and romantic relationships have to blossom. Truth be told, I've never been a fan of this wee interlude in the Bahamas. Perhaps it's just because the set pieces before and after are so enthralling, but these scenes have just never quite sat right with me. It's nice to see Bond drive the BMW for all of 5 seconds before it's swapped out for a plane when he meets up with Jack Wade again. He gives Bond some useful gadgets from...
What's his name? T-Z-Q. Yeah.
And lets him know that he'll be there once the mission is complete. That's all well and good, and the scenery here is gorgeous, but the couple scenes that follow with Natalia being pissed off by Bond's cold and callous nature feel forced. This odd moment comes out of left field and seems shoehorned in so we can have a fleeting instant where we delve into Bond's psyche a bit. I guess it was added to make him a more three-dimensional character, but not a moment later he's forced Natalia into another kiss to shut her up. I mean, these intimate sections mean well, but I'm glad they only last a few minutes because they drag out the pacing of this film significantly so near the end. Luckily, we're almost immediately launched back into the action as Bond and Natalia fly over the area in Cuba where they suspect Boris's computer signal had been sent from. Scanning the area for a satellite dish, they find nothing until a missile is fired from under the lake, setting the plane alight and sending them crashing into the jungle below. I distinctly remember thinking that Natalia was dead here the first time I watched, and thought that 007 would shockingly have to complete his mission alone. Of course, this isn't the case, she's just been knocked out, and as is Bond when he suddenly collapses from exhaustion. He barely gets a moment to himself before Xenia rappels down from a hovering chopper and starts squeezing the ever-loving fuck out of Bond, leading to some phenomenal examples of Brosnan's famous pain face. Gotta love it. Natalia's next to useless here, so Bond has to do the dirty work and rehooks her back onto the chopper before gunning it down. This sends Xenia flying up onto a tree which I'm guessing suffocates her to death or perhaps breaks her back. It would be damn agony anyway however she perished, and Bond comes out with the perfect post-kill pun.
She always did enjoy a good squeeze.
The water is then drained from the lake in an obvious reverse shot as a giant satellite antenna is revealed from below. Underneath the dish in an underground control centre, we see Alec and Boris activate the second GoldenEye satellite and set the EMP to target jolly old London. Bond and Natalia get shot at from across the chasm and end up incidentally finding the easiest way into the bunker. As Natalia disappears to mess up the satellite's programming, Bond places Q's mines on fuel tanks and dodges oncoming bullets in the most badass way possible. With the tanks now leaking fluid, Bond surrenders and is brought to Alec, who immediately disarms everything Bond has set up. This is just one of many scenes that demonstrate why it's so cool to have Bond go up against another 00 and fellow agent. He knows all of his tricks and can pretty much KO him verbally as well.
I might as well ask you if all the vodka martinis ever silenced the screams of all the men you've killed.
Natalia is captured soon afterwards, but we soon find out she's managed to fuck up Boris's work in some way or another. I always get a good laugh when Natalia is reunited with Boris and instantly goes for him. He's such a wimp in the way he goes flying across the floor helplessly, but then acts like the tough man when she's restrained. Alec reveals his plan to cause a nationwide blackout. He'll steal the money from the Bank of London reserves while every single electronic record is wiped off the map, meaning he can't be traced. It's not exactly an expired scheme and just boils down to robbery as Bond states, but it's interesting enough jargon to keep us intrigued as the film ramps up for its showdown. Boris has ended up in possession of the grenade pen, and Bond's focus shifts solely onto him as he clicks away at it while his satellite goes apeshit thanks to Natalia. This part is genuinely great as we try to follow how many clicks are happening along with Bond. Finally, Boris cracks and screams for the access code, all while clicking the pen 3 times in succession and activating the C4 mechanism. Bond knocks the pen into a pool of leaking fluid and sets off an enormous explosion, nearly destroying the whole centre. This gives him just the diversion needed to hightail it out of there. While on a lift, Bond gives Natalia his pistol and makes a run for the dish to try and make double sure that there's no chance the satellite can lock onto London and fire the EMP. Shit gets real here. As Boris is forced to break Natalia's code, Alec chases Bond onto the antenna, shooting at him from a mini cable car and sending him diving down a set of stairs in a classy stunt. One wee detail about this scene, and the whole film really, is that the ricochet sounds the bullets make are so over the top that you've got to love them. Every time I hear that, sound in other media, my mind is always brought back to GoldenEye, as it's played every damn time a gun is fired. Bond then jams a hunk of pipe into the antenna mechanism, which malfunctions the whole machine and sends Boris into an epileptic fit.
Speak to me!
It's at this point that the greatest hand-to-hand fight in the whole franchise breaks out, as the music completely stops and we get a gritty scene of these two highly skilled agents going at it. It barely lasts a minute, but it's so well executed that you feel every blow and missed opportunity. Surprisingly, 006 gets the upper hand and is about to finish Bond off, but he manages to kick out a maintenance ladder in time and slide all the way down to avoid a bullet in the skull. The part where Alex slides down the ladder after him and sends Bond rolling mid-climb always looks extremely painful. The fact that he whacks his bollocks off the stock may have something to do with this though. They eventually scrap in the lowest point of the cradle as Bond gets his ass handed to him. Praise the Lord that Natalia has held a helicopter pilot at gunpoint and is needing them to save the day. The sight of an oncoming chopper distracts Alec for the shortest of moments, but it's enough for Bond to get the better of him and ultimately send him plummeting to the concrete below in a sharp-witted manner.
For England, James?
No. For me.
The love music then starts up prematurely as Bond leaps to safety. Just then the whole antenna ignites and comes crashing down on top of Alec, who's still somehow alive and even manages to let out a blood-curdling yell. I know Bond films aren't particularly known for their realism, but I find it hard to believe Alec would have survived a fall of that height and had enough left in him to scream at the top of his uncrushed lungs. His leg does near disintegrate on landing though, I'll give them that. Anyway, it's a really memorable demise, and this antenna is caved in with enough force to break through solid concrete and wreck the underground base below. Boris rises from the rubble, proud as punch to be the sole survivor, and lets out one final trademark yell.
Yes! I am invincible!
He then iconically gets frozen to death by a wave of liquid nitrogen and stands there like an ironic trophy of success. This death is a bit cartoony in nature, but it's a fitting end for such a larger-than-life loony like Boris. With the evil plan foiled and all the villains wiped out, there's nothing for our two leads to do but lay in a nearby field and start getting it on. Before they get much business done though, Jack Wade appears out of thin air with a unit of seemingly silent US Marines hiding all over the place. How in the fuck Bond didn't notice at least one of these choppers hovering above him, I'll never know. It's no matter though, as they share one final affectionate moment with each other before taking off safely and heading to Guantanamo to finish their business. It's a fitting end, but for the love of God don't hang around long for the end credits. As Eric says, the experience of love will put you into a stage 1 coma.
The experience of loving will take all the pain away.
So that's GoldenEye. How does it hold up after all those years? Remarkably well, I'd say. I'll start with the biggest component of the film. Pierce Brosnan as James Bond. He had the unenviable task of carrying on the legacy of one of cinema's most popular characters at a point in time when most people thought James Bond was past it. Following the hit and miss License to Kill, the series needed a good shake-up to bring back audiences, and Brosnan helps do just that. The man looks like he was born to play Bond, with the good looks, the walk, the talk and the charisma. He's as smooth as silk here, and cooler than the other side of your pillow. He brought back that fun factor in 007, and made the majority of audiences once again wish to be the spy with a license to kill. The script gave Brosnan ample opportunities to bounce off of all the secondary characters, and sink his teeth into some emotional moments, which would become a rarity as his tenure went on. As mentioned, the script is often sharp as a tack, but much of the credit, I would wager, has to go to director Martin Campbell. He breathes such life into the film and creates a final product that oozes style. The whole look of GoldenEye could be fittingly described as debonair. From the cinematography to the costume design and slick editing, it's as suave as hell and results in something that feels like the epitome of what we all believe a Bond film should be. The plot is above average for a 007 Adventure 2 and only starts to wobble near the very end when the villain's plan is revealed to be a pithy act of revenge for what the British did to Alex's Cossack parents. It kinda paints him as a spoilt brat who's just getting his own back because he can, and the whole bank robbery scheme feels slightly shoehorned in. You never get the feeling that he's after the wealth until he first mentions it to Urimov on the train. Anyhow, aside from that minor gripe, the story is solid throughout and majorly escalated by the host of intriguing, larger-than-life characters who pop in and out throughout the runtime. I would say with confidence that this is the greatest ensemble of villains to ever coexist in a James Bond film. Every one of them leave a lasting impression, but special shout out has to go to Famke Janssen as Xenia on the top. She will forever be the outstanding femme fatale and gets to steal so many scenes with her unhinged pastime of crushing men to death with her mighty thighs. The good guys are strong too, with Sikorsky sticking out the most. He's such a likeable adversary turned ally. I'm always so glad that they brought him back for a future instalment, and certainly handled his return with more class than they did with Jack Wade. Poor sod. Isabella Scorupco makes for one of my favourite Bond girls in Natalia. She frequently uses her brain to get out of harm and assists Bond more than once in the back half of the film, even fucking up Boris's code and saving the day in the end. Last but certainly not least, we come on to the action of the film. I certainly wouldn't say GoldenEye is as jam-packed with action as Pierce's following films, but there's several impressive set pieces that stand out all the more because of this. The pre-title sequence starts with a lofty bang and never lets up until the credits roll. It's arguably the best 10 minutes of the film and is cemented in cinematic history as the stuff of legend. The middle act of the movie may be light on set pieces, but that's all changed by the time half of St. Petersburg is ripped to shreds. This tank chase would be the highlight of just about any film. It really does raise your pulse and exudes a sense of sheer entertainment that I often feel the more modern Daniel Craig films are lacking in. There's a constant sense of forward momentum from start to finish in this entry, but it's never more evident in the run up to the incredible climax between the two 00s in the top of the cradle. It's been routine since the 60s for the finale to take place in some exotic villain lair, and GoldenEye takes this concept and runs with it. Although the budget they had at their disposal wasn't massive for an action film in the mid-90s, the events atop the gigantic satellite antenna add such a sense of scope and scale to the whole romp, even with the occasional dodgy green screen backdrop making an appearance. So, to sum up, GoldenEye is Bond at its absolute best. It's a blast of a movie that contains just about everything you could ever want from a 007 adventure. The only major shortcoming is really that dodgy electronic score from Eric Serra. But even that is so closely tied to the feel of the film that I wouldn't ever wish it to be switched out. It's no secret that these films all follow a semi-flexible formula, fondly referred to as the Bond cocktail, and I would confidently declare that GoldenEye absolutely perfects that cocktail mix. That's not to say it's a perfect film, of course not, but it was evidently fine enough to rake in the money at the box office and get a whole new generation fascinated by James Bond once again. GoldenEye updated the franchise while simultaneously reinvigorating it, and currently holds the honour of being my favourite James Bond film of all time. And that's coming from someone who's never played the famed N64 game. What more could I say? Next time round I'll be tackling the following film in the series, Tomorrow Never Dies, which is a different beast entirely. Thanks very much for watching and I hope you'll join me then.